Oops. Hello Wendy, this is David, and I'm making just a little tiny video here to tell you how to use the information I sent you. I suspect you've gotten the information. If you don't get it today, you will tomorrow, because I sent it 2 or 3 days ago. Anyway, what I gave you was a DVD, which looks like, well, like a DVD, and a thumb drive that I guess it's a little bit bigger than this thumb drive, but you know, it's a thumb drive. It happens to be USB 3. I usually send out USB 2, but I had a USB 3 laying around. They're a lot faster if you have a USB 3 connection on your computer. If not, they work anyway. So anyway, when you get that, whoops, so, when you get that and manage to drop it on the floor like I did, I guess here's another one. This one is teeny tiny, but and it's mine. It's actually 128 gigabyte one. God, it's amazing what they can put in the small spaces now, isn't it? Anyway, what you do, well, first thing is I sent you a DVD. I don't think you have a DVD drive. If you do, what you can do is you can put the DVD into your machine and before you shut it down, and when you boot the machine, it probably will try to boot off the DVD. If it boots off the DVD, everything comes up and you will have an operating system. It's running directly off the DVD, so it's a little bit slow, but it's a real true Linux. It's an excellent Linux, and you can do all sorts of things with that. Better yet, I have installed that DVD on a thumb drive like this, and I'll tell you just a word or two about that. The version of Linux I sent you, the distribution is called knoppix. That is, knoppix is okay. There it says knoppix down here, knoppix 8.1. I actually sent you knoppix 8.1. That's the newest release of knoppix. And let me shrink myself. I disappeared myself completely here. Let me shrink myself and let me put this on all desktops, and someplace here I can make it kind of so it always appears. Oh, we want to keep it above others. Oh yeah, that should work. Okay. Anyway, knoppix is one of hundreds and hundreds of Linux distributions. I've used to create Linux distributions myself. This one is produced by Klaus and his wife, Klaus and Adriana Knopper, who are German, but they live in I think they live in Oakland, California. I'm not absolutely certain of that. And Klaus does a lot of writing. His English is very good. He does a lot of writing. So he writes for a couple Linux journals, as well as keeping this distribution together. It's a cold distribution because it is designed to run as a live distribution directly off DVD or off of a thumb drive, whereas most of the other 100 million live distributions are built to convince you to install their distribution on a hard drive and use it permanently. Klaus's is built to just to use it as a live distribution, so it's probably not going to be not meant to be your leading distribution. It's meant to be your number one go-to emergency distribution, and it's really good for that. Okay, if you've got it on thumb drive, what you can do is you put your thumb drive into a USB slot, boot the computer, and see what happens. I assume it will boot in Windows and not work so well. Okay, the reason for that is you have to have your BIOS settings set some which way so it will boot off of the thumb drive. Okay, let me tell you how this works. I can't tell you exactly how this works because every computer is different. What the BIOS is it's software that is built onto the motherboard. It's the first software a computer uses when it boots up, and it boots that software, and that software tells it where to go to boot the operating systems. So the BIOS is not really part of Linux or part of Windows or part of anything else. It is actually software that is on the motherboard itself, and what you have to do to go into the BIOS usually. Now there are sometimes programs that can be ran by Windows that will take you into the BIOS to allow you to change settings, but what's normally done is you boot the computer, and usually it will say something just as it first boots. Really quickly it will say something like hit F1 to go into setup, or hit escape, or hit the del key, or something of that type. So what you need to do is shut down your computer, put the thumb drive into a USB slot, shut down your computer, power off, power it on, and just as it boots, hit the escape key or the F1 or F2 or del key or whatever key it tells you in order to get into that program. If you don't do it at the exact right moment in time, it will then boot Windows and whatever. But if you do it at the right time, then there will be a program that comes up that has menus or tabs or something like that, usually tabs nowadays, and someplace in all those menus it will say boot order, and you want to go into that boot order and change it so that it will boot off the flash drive. And actually you can move the flash drive to the top. Generally, if you save that and then you save that setting, if you then reboot, it will let you it will boot into knoppix. If the flash drive is not in the machine and you reboot, Windows will be, or the hard disk will be number 2 or 3 priority in the boot system, and it will just since it won't be able to find the DVD that it can boot, it will go to Windows. Or you can change the boot order back so it boots off your hard drive first. And there's no danger getting screwed up of really monkeying up your computer doing this, because you can always get it back to the way it was. And that will let you boot off of the knoppix DVD. I'm afraid, since I'm doing this video on my OpenSUSE computer, I can't really boot knoppix and show you what it's like. I suppose I could if I had a virtual machine on here, but I don't. But I'll say a couple things. I have had a little trouble with knoppix 8.1 booting on really small old computers. of course, because this runs a live distribution, you do have to have, you know, quite a bit of RAM. I like quite a bit, isn't that much? It's a gigabyte. In the old days, it seemed to me like I booted machines in knoppix with as little as 256 megabytes, but this version of knoppix seems to take more than. I was actually having a little trouble on one of my old decrepit laptops. I only bought it for about $100, and I've been having a little trouble. It hasn't been booting knoppix very reliably. Knoppix has been freezing on it occasionally, and I don't know. It's probably got a full gigabyte of RAM, maybe more. I'm not sure. It seems to me like knoppix should run on it from my past experience, and it's not doing as good as I would expect. But on all my other machines, you know, every knoppix I've ever used comes up just fine. Knoppix 8.1 is running really great on my everyday machine, which is really an old machine too. It's far from my most powerful machine, but I like it, so I use it as my everyday machine. My big fast machines are servers, and I don't normally sit at those. Anyway, once knoppix is booted, you'll see some sort of graphical user interface. It's not one I have, but it's a very, very nice graphical user interface that has multiple workspaces. If you take your middle mouse button and spin it around, it will go to multiple workspaces, just like this computer is. It uses a different interface than the one I'm showing you right here, but it's a very, very nice interface. It's called LCDE. I can't remember the name of it. I like it a lot. It's not my favorite one, so it's not the one I run on my everyday machines, but it's a very nice one. I do run it a lot. I like knoppix a lot. What you will find is knoppix has probably about, I would guess, about 4,000 commands in it. It's got things like LibreOffice, the open source equivalent to MS Office. It's got a compiler for every or a compiler or an interpreter for every language you can think of: Fortran, Haskell, C, C++, Python, Python version 2, Python version 3, Ruby, they're all there. GIMP, the GIMP is there, which is an open source equivalent to Photoshop. Lots and lots of graphics tools are there. Quite a few music tools are there. It's wonderful. But what they want you to do, what the instructions want you to do, or I want you to do, is if we go in and we look at our instructions, and forget all the stuff on virtualization, we're not going to worry about that for you. They want you to open a terminal. So we can go here, and someplace in the menus you'll find something for opening a terminal. It may be called Xterm or console or something like that. Let's see what I've got here on my menu system here. Well, I don't know. I call it Xterm, but that's because that's the one I open most of the time. A console would work. Well, we're going to use Xterm because Xterm is really a standard one that's used. Everybody's got Xterm, whereas some of the other ones, they're only on certain distributions. And then you can type in commands, like there's a command pdf or pwd. That stands for where am I. It's some sort of initials for something. I think it's present working directory. LS stands for list or something. It tells me what files I have in in my current directory. The files I have seem to be, well, that's the files there. And I think the blue ones are directories, and the purple ones are something, and the other ones are normal text files, something like that. The colors are not standard. Some distributions use those colors, some don't. The coloring is really non-standard. In fact, if I do this, you see all the colors go away. So and then basically just play with a lot of the commands. I will say it says to use the stat command. As you see, I do not have a stat command. I'm not sure why the assignment has the stat command, because it's a good command, but it's not around on many Unix machines. It's probably only around on a third to 50% of Unix machines. So, you know, and I think it tells you about individual files. I can find out all of that information with something like this. There's other ways to find the information, so you know, so it's not real. You know, the stat command's not an important command. I guess I think differently than other people, because other people think it's an important command. However, I've been doing Linux and Unix for, I'd say 20 years, but no. Well, since the 1980s, that's more than 20 years. So you know, my opinions are probably as worthy as other people's. With regard to Linux or Unix type stuff. Okay, that is about it. Basically play around with the commands a little bit. Actually, you will notice there is a command Emacs that is on the Linux, on the knoppix system as well. You might like to look at that editor. That's my favorite editor. I'm sure VI is there as well as Emacs, which is another editor that half the world really loves. The hardcore open source programming people are kind of evenly divided between love of VI and love of Emacs. They're both very fine editors. So I can't say anything bad about VI. Actually, I use VI a lot, but Emacs is my favorite editor. And then there must be some web browsers on the system. I'm sure Firefox is on Firefox. Oh, and if your networking is not terribly complicated or terribly manual, knoppix will figure out your knoppix usually figures out your networking and sets it up automatically for you. I won't say it always works, but it works about 95% of the time. So I'm assuming it will probably work. The only times it really fails is if you have a network card of some sort. Usually that's a wireless card that isn't well supported with Linux. And there's a few other times it will fail, but those are kind of exotic. It works 95% of the time. Um, One of the nice things about knoppix is Klaus and Adriana were groundbreakers and trendsetters in being able to automate configuration processes. I saw their work for the first time, I guess, in about 2000 or something like that. I was doing similar work at the time, and there were two things I saw as I was doing the work. One was the beginnings of good high quality virtualization, which we did not really have. We had virtualization, but not good high quality virtualization prior to the early part of the early 2000s. That was really groundworking and really changed the nature of my work. The other one was automating configuration processes, and I was so I think the whole world was impressed with the Knoppers' work on automating configuration processes. This was, this 2000, so it's 20 years ago, but it was just groundbreaking work. I mean, it was really terrific work, and their distribution is really a good distribution. I'm a big fan of their work, in case you can't tell. Anyway, Firefox and Firefox is on there. It will come up and it will feel pretty much like Firefox. The other one that is no doubt there, in fact I know it's there, is Chromium, which will come up and do all sorts of things for you, and work like it does in Windows or on a Mac. I will say I occasionally put a ampersand behind certain commands. Ignore those ampersands. My fingers just go there so quickly and automatically, but you will learn what that is about if you take the class CIS 241 or 240, 240L, the class on Linux. At least I hope you do, or even the Unix class, CS 140U, I think it is. I've taught it. But those are optional. You don't need them. It's just that they do nice things, and my fingers go there automatically on commands that pop open a new window. So ignore my typing of ampersands. Okay, that's everything I had to say. That will give you enough to do the assignment, and then just play around and poke around and do a little write-up telling me what you did. And if worse comes to worse, if everything goes wrong, you can't do anything, tell me why you can't do anything, and I will grade you pretty gently on that, because that's part of the process. That's part of the learning process, and I'm truly hoping things go well. I will also say that the advantage of putting knoppix on, there are several advantages of putting knoppix on one of these over a DVD. Advantage 1, it runs 5 or more times faster than running it off a DVD, because a DVD is very slow. I could speed it up still more by putting it on a hard disk, but that's not for this class. It just makes everything run faster. The second thing is a DVD you cannot write to, so it makes it hard to impossible to save your work. Well, hard. You can still save your work, but you've got to save it over the network, or you've got to save it onto your Windows disk or something of that type, because you can't write to the DVD because it's already been written to. Or, yeah, DVDs are one-time write devices. There is the most clever system in knoppix that can, they really just put the image of the DVD on your thumb drive. It's really just the DVD image, but they have a special system that they put on that allows them to write files. And kind of what it does is, you might write a file, like maybe one of the files on the system you want to update. You write it writes the file into basically a Windows area or just a file area on the DVD, on the thumb drive. And then when all the system's commands, when they go to use things, they say, first they say, do I have a new one that I should use? An updated copy of whatever file this is. If not, use the one from the DVD image. It's a really cool system. I think they've renamed it, but it used to be called Union FS, and I really like the name Union FS because I believe they use a new name now, but the new name is not as descriptive of the process as Union FS. Union FS is a beautiful name for what they're doing. Okay, well, I went on a little long here, but clearly I want you to do the assignment and I want you to enjoy the pleasures of the Linux Unix environment. It really is a wonderful environment. I've made my career off of environments of this type. My whole career has been in open source software. I've been, hey, people paid me to play with to write open source software. That's pretty cool. And I'm, for me personally, it's almost a vocation. I'd so much rather do that than writing proprietary stuff. It's cool. So, okay. Anyway, bye-bye. As soon as I can figure out how to turn this thing off.